Greetings, fellow cultivators. Welcome to Autonova. Remember to like and subscribe to support the journey. Now, let's dive into the next chapter of A Will Eternal. The undying live forever technique is like soil. What grows in that soil is up to one's personal Tao. Above demigods are celestials, and above celestials are archeans. If I want to become an archean, then according to what Gongsun Wan'er said, I need to get my Dao seed to sprout, and become Tao will. Those who have Tao will are archeans. Dao seed, Tao will, that is the difference between celestials and archeans. Before his cultivation base breakthrough, his understanding had been somewhat muddled. But now that he had a Dao seed, he suddenly felt much clearer about the Tao will of archeans. Celestials can use their Dao seed to borrow will from all living beings, and become one with them. But archeans can use their Tao will, to transcend heaven and earth. They can exist on a higher level than anything else, in a position that celestials cannot even touch. The Tao will of an archean can cover the whole world. Their will can shape fate. That's why they can resurrect fallen celestials. Although he wasn't sure if his analysis was absolutely correct in every aspect, he was confident that, overall, it was close enough. In other words, I have to create my own third codex of the undying live forever technique. At this point, his eyes began to shine brightly. The point of the third codex is to get my Dao seed to sprout, and bloom into Tao will. As he murmured these things, his aura, his cultivation base fluctuations, and everything else about him focused inward. Nothing was detectable on the outside. At the same time, he sank into a state of utter calm, without any traces of either joy or sorrow. Being undying is a state. Although regeneration seems like an important aspect, the truth is that it has more to do with time. Only by being indestructible for endless years can something be considered truly undying. Being able to live forever is a state of mind, and yet, also has to do with time, and the ability to continue to live. In that case, what should the third codex be about? Closing his eyes, he descended further into calm contemplation. He recalled years past, he recalled cultivating the undying codex, and he recalled acquiring the live forever codex. He recalled the heavenspan realm, and he recalled his own history. Those memories existed within him as clear as day. As he worked on creating his own new technique, his cultivation base focused completely inwardly. Meanwhile, the vortex outside of his blessed land had vanished entirely. The voice which had murmured into the ears of all living beings faded off into the distance. The world returned to normal. The three celestials still hovered in midair, looking down quietly at the blessed land. Although few other people knew what Bai Xiaochun was doing right now, the celestials obviously knew. He's creating a new technique. Chen Su murmured. All three of the celestials had done a similar thing back when they broke through. They knew how important this step was. Not only would it determine Bai Xiaochun's battle prowess as a celestial, but it could also lead to a situation in which the eternal immortal domains might have a third Archean emperor sometime in the future. As for the court officials and other important cultivators in Saint Emperor City, none of them knew exactly what Bai Xiaochun was doing at the moment, and yet, their eyes still flickered with fear as they looked in the direction of his blessed land. Although there were no more powerful fluctuations rolling out from the blessed land, people could sense from the utter stillness and quiet there that something powerful was inside, like a wild beast with its eyes closed, that could open them and devour anything that got too close. Back when Bai Xiaochun had been a demigod, they weren't too worried about mocking or deriding him. But now, he had become a celestial. In all of the eternal immortal domains, there were only 10 others. As of now, he was not the type of person that others could point and laugh at. Everyone lived in an imperial dynasty with laws and rules, but it was also the cultivation world, in which people respected the powerful. If Bai Xiaochun were not from the heavenspan realm, everyone would have been very excited and proud. But Bai Xiaochun was different, and therefore, it caused many mixed feelings to rise up in the hearts of the cultivators of Saint Emperor City. Many of them were thinking back in fear to how rudely they had reacted to the incidents with the heavenly dragonfish and the lotus seeds. Others had submitted official requests that he be executed. If he had remained a demigod, it would have been one thing. But he was now a celestial, a fact that caused bitterness to grip the hearts of the officials. Now, none of them wanted him in Saint Emperor City. For one thing, based on past events, they could only imagine what the future might bring. Back when he was a demigod, he nearly destroyed the foundation of Saint Emperor City. Looking forward, that means that the city is in grave peril. We have to get him out of here. It's been made clear that Parole Captain Lu was right. He's a walking disaster. He's only been in Saint Emperor City for about a year, and during that time, more than half of the heavenly dragonfish vanished, 70% of the lotus seeds disappeared, and the lotus roots, suffered a serious blow. The venerable Saint Emperor might be able to weather such disasters, but we can't. I'm absolutely convinced that if things keep going on the way they have, this guy's ability to cause disasters, backed by a celestial cultivation base, will leave us completely powerless. Even worse, he's a master at quibbling his way out of problems. We're in serious trouble. Virtually everyone was thinking the same thing, and many people began to make petitions of the Saint Emperor. Your Majesty, Duke Heavenspan becoming a celestial is a grand occasion for the Saint Emperor dynasty. I would like to submit an official request to the court. Based on Duke Heavenspan's status and meritorious services, it is not appropriate for him to be kept behind in Saint Emperor City. He should be sent to take command of the second immortal domain. Your Majesty, the second immortal domain is constantly at odds with the vile Emperor dynasty. Celestial Zhao Yuanhan has been stationed there for years now, working very hard and performing great services for the Saint Emperor dynasty. The time has definitely come for him to retire. That's right, Your Majesty. I would also like to submit an official request to the court that Duke Heavenspan be sent away. We really shouldn't be such a disappointment to him. After all, he kidnapped a celestial to give as a blood tribute. Meritorious service like that deserves a truly substantial reward. The official requests began to pile up in front of the Saint Emperor. Many people even petitioned for personal audiences in which they offered all sorts of persuasive arguments. In the end, the message was the same: no one wanted Bai Xiaochun to stay in Saint Emperor City. The truth was that Bai Xiaochun had even become a headache to the Saint Emperor, who had also come to the realization that it had been a big mistake to keep him in the city. Never could he have imagined how much of a torment that would be. Not only did he cleverly make sure that there was never any good evidence that could be used against him, he also managed to constantly make himself more important. The Saint Emperor couldn't help but lament the loss of the heavenly dragonfish, and how it would be years before the lotus seeds could be harvested again. And then there were the yellowing lotus leaves and the wilted flower. The Saint Emperor was absolutely convinced that if Bai Xiaochun remained behind, he would be the end of them all. He also sympathized with all the other cultivators in the city, and could well imagine how scared they were about what would happen when Bai Xiaochun emerged from secluded meditation. Damn that Bai Xiaochun! The more the Saint Emperor thought about the situation, the angrier he got, and the more worried about the future he became. Finally he sighed, aware that if you ride a tiger, it's hard to get off. No matter what decision he made, it would have negative ramifications. And that was without even thinking about what the vile Emperor dynasty would do to take advantage of the situation. Damn this Bai Xiaochun! How could he be such a torment? If I'd have known things would end up like this, I would never have accepted his blood tribute. Sighing, he was just about to make his decision when he realized that if he got rid of Bai Xiaochun in the way everyone was requesting, then the second immortal domain would be in great peril. In the past, he would never have come to this conclusion. But the events of the past year, and his personal experience with Bai Xiaochun's torments, caused fear to grip the Saint Emperor's heart. Unfortunately, now that Bai Xiaochun was a celestial, he couldn't be put in charge of a prefecture. It could only be an immortal domain. Even as the Saint Emperor wrestled with the issue, and the court officials continued to submit requests, Bai Xiaochun was seated cross-legged in his blessed land, thinking about everything that had happened in his life. Eventually, his eyes opened, partly blank, partly alive with enlightenment. My memories of the Heavenspan realm, from the time I was born until everything ended. All of the former things. The Dao seed needs to sprout roots, and eventually bloom into Dao will. Put it all together, and you have former will. Although the Undying Codex and the Live Forever Codex aren't technically connected in any way, Bai Xiaochun murmured, they still conform to the same general idea. Therefore, my third codex. My memories of the past will be former will, my current Tao will be present will, and my upcoming destiny will be future will. As he uttered these words, the enlightenment in his eyes grew clearer, and the blankness faded. Clarity began to take over. His voice thrummed in strange fashion, as if with the power of natural law. It seemed as though his voice existed around him, beyond the heavens, in the past, and in the future. Rifts opened up in the area, as well as a series of spinning vortexes. It was almost like a tempest, and yet, it was only visible within the blessed land, and nowhere outside. Anyone who might have been able to cast their vision into the blessed land would have been able to sense time twisting and distorting, flowing in a different way than in the world outside. It was as if the past, the present, and the future were all fusing together within that blessed land. It was impossible to truly describe or understand, and was profoundly shocking. The truth was that this technique Bai Xiaochun was making surpassed anything that anyone else could imagine. And if anyone could have it described to them, they would be deeply shaken. After all, celestials could temporarily reverse time, but they could only do so by means of certain Taoist magics. And in some situations, it was only possible with the help of an Archean emperor. But Bai Xiaochun was essentially probing the Tao of time. As the rifts filled his blessed land, and the tempest raged with increasing intensity, Bai Xiaochun murmured, "Former will. Present will. Future will. When I master those three types of will, then I will break through from the celestial realm and reach the Archean realm. This codex describes time immemorial. Therefore, it will be called the Time Immemorial Codex." Bai Xiaochun's eyes shone as brightly as if they brimmed with lightning. Rumbling sounds filled the blessed land as Bai Xiaochun became what appeared to be an enormous black hole. It was a black hole that existed in a different dimension than the eternal immortal domains. As it spread out, it didn't affect the blessed land in even the slightest aspect. From here on out, I cultivate the undying live forever time immemorial technique. He waved his hand, and heavenly thunder rumbled as the previously calm sky suddenly filled with flashing colors. Whether it was court officials submitting requests in the imperial palace, the three celestials, or the Saint Emperor, all of them suddenly looked up into the sky. The officials suddenly had very ill premonitions, and as for the celestials, they began to pant in shock. That aura. What kind of technique is Bai Xiaochun making? The Saint Emperor's eyes shone with scintillating light, and although he managed to remain calm, a faint scrap of killing intent appeared within his heart. The Tao of time. Of course, Bai Xiaochun was unaware of all of that. He was wrapped up in creating his technique. Although he was now clear as to the nature of it, he still had much to do in the way of analysis and augury. The Time Immemorial Codex has three wills, which cannot be created simultaneously. For now, I will work on that which comes from my past. I will use the countless memories of my life to feed my Daoseed. When that process is complete, the true former will appear. When that happens, then even if I am killed and cease to exist, my Daoseed will still remain, along with my memories and my obsessions. A smile broke out onto his face. If I don't take some of my Daoseed and give it to the Saint Emperor, then I would have no hope of being resurrected. But with my former will, perhaps, to some extent, I will have achieved my Tao, and reached the point of being able to exist for all eternity. In the heavenspan realm, I experienced death, and thus, in some ways I also experienced reincarnation. Therefore, the divine ability associated with my former will shall be the Sutra of Former Reincarnation. All of a sudden, the light of augury faded from his eyes as he saw everything, from Mount Hood all the way to the destruction of the heavenspan realm. Spiritual power, divine abilities, willpower, my memories, they are all expressions of power. Henceforth, anyone who hears this sutra spoken aloud will find the memories of their lives transformed into magical sealing symbols. Those with deeper and more ancient memories will find the power of the magical symbols shocking to the extreme. The Sutra of Former Reincarnation can destroy memories and eradicate minds. Bai Xiaochun rose to his feet, and in that instant, the black hole that seemed to exist in another reality expanded. In the blink of an eye, his blessed land seemed to fade, as though a shocking power was about to wipe it out of existence. A moment later, the air distorted, and everything went back to normal. Rippling fluctuations spread out in all directions, causing both the living entities they passed, and even the inanimate objects like buildings, to flicker back and forth between being blurry and being clear. Gu Tianjun and the other two celestials were still in the area, and were touched by the fluctuations. They had originally thought to evade them, but then decided that it would be a good way to test out the divine abilities and techniques that Bai Xiaochun had created, and perhaps get a sense for his battle prowess. However, as soon as the fluctuations reached them, their expressions flickered dramatically, and they retreated at full speed. After they were out of the range of the fluctuations, it was impossible for them to conceal the shock they felt. Ordinary in terms of might, but the Taoist magic involved is peculiar to the extreme. It's almost like I was just looking at my own past. What did I just see? It was like my own memories, come to life in front of me. The three celestials exchanged very serious glances. Throughout the rest of the city, numerous cultivators felt their hearts pounding in fear. As for the Saint Emperor, he retracted his vision, spent a moment in thought, and then prepared to issue a proclamation. However, even as he did, a boundless energy suddenly descended onto the eternal immortal domains. Expression flickering, the Saint Emperor suddenly vanished, to reappear high in the sky. He didn't just hover there, he continued to rise higher and higher. Something was happening now that was more shocking to him than Bai Xiaochun's cultivation-based breakthrough, or the technique he was creating that was based on the Tao of time. Although other people would only be able to sense some faint pressure, as an Archean, the Saint Emperor could tell that a very oppressive energy was approaching from the starry sky. Outside of the eternal immortal domains, behind the body of the gargantuan sovereign, out in the boundless void, the massive, damaged fan that had responded to the vortex that Bai Xiaochun created upon becoming a celestial was approaching with incredible speed. As of this moment, it had entered the borders of the region considered the edge of the eternal immortal domains. As it closed in, it adjusted its trajectory again, almost as if the shapeless vortex created by Bai Xiaochun was drawing it in. After these adjustments, the fan was not going to just brush by the eternal immortal domains, it was going to hit them. More precisely, it was actually going to hit the gargantuan sovereign right above them. It moved with incredible speed, unleashing powerful fluctuations. Furthermore, it was moving so quickly that it trailed flames as it moved. With every moment that passed, the fan got closer and closer to the eternal immortal domains. Anyone who could view the scene from out in the void would see something that looked like a burning meteor, descending with shocking energy and momentum. The speed involved defied imagination. Earlier, despite the fact that the damaged fan had changed trajectory because of Bai Xiaochun, it hadn't been on course to hit the eternal immortal domains. Furthermore, its speed hadn't been that shocking. As such, neither the vile emperor nor the Saint Emperor had noticed it. But now, as the fan's momentum built, and its trajectory became locked in, strange signs began to appear in the eternal immortal domains. The first place to be affected was the eternal sea. The water was tugged at as if by tidal forces, and rumbling sounds echoed out in all directions. Mist began to rise up from the sea, and the shores of the immortal domain were battered by massive waves. The living beings in the eternal immortal domains were all struck with deep shock. Meanwhile, as the Saint Emperor flew up into the sky, Gu Tianjun and the other two celestials looked up in astonishment. As for Bai Xiaochun, he had just completed his breakthrough and created his former will, and had been about to leave his blessed land. That was when he felt an incredible pressure, along with an indescribably intense sensation of crisis. Something dangerous is coming from above. Blurring into motion, he flew high into the sky. It wasn't just the Saint Emperor dynasty in which such things occurred. In Vile Emperor City, the Archean Vile Emperor blurred into motion to appear up above, where he headed up to the very limits of the sky. He was followed by 4 beams of light, which were the celestials of his dynasty. 2 celestials did not come, one of them being Ghost Mother. Of those present, all wore looks of incredulity as they peered high into the sky. When people in both of the capital cities saw the dramatic events playing out with the emperors and the celestials, their hearts filled with sensations of unease. What is that? As people cried out in alarm, they began to look up into the sky, where something like a burning meteor was now visible. Based on their vantage point, it didn't seem to be moving very quickly, although that couldn't have been less the case. The Saint Emperor and Vile Emperor teleported to the limits of the world, until they were almost hovering out in the void itself. Their senses were more acute than those of anyone else in the world, and they could also physically see the bright, glowing light of the approaching fan. It was moving so incredibly quickly that it would arrive within only about 10 breaths of time. Both emperors could tell that the thing was going so fast that neither of them could possibly stop it. It was at this point that both of them breathed sighs of relief. No one else would be able to see it, but because of their incredible cultivation bases, they were able to pick up on clues which pointed to the fact that the fan would not strike the eternal immortal domains, but rather, the enormous sovereign. As the fan neared, their hearts calmed to some extent. However, they were still shocked as they realized that the aura of the fan seemed to be that of an Archean. Despite the fact that the moment of crisis seemed to have passed, the two of them remained in place just in case something unexpected occurred. The Vile Emperor turned to look at the Saint Emperor, and spoke in a sinister and cold voice. "It's big, but it's nothing more than a damaged Archean treasure. It won't cause any problems. Now that it's here, though, I'll take 6 spots." The Saint Emperor smiled, and in response to the Vile Emperor's coldness, spoke in the warmest of voices. "It's been a long time since any damaged treasures fell into the eternal immortal domains from the void. If it weren't for the vortex created by Bai Xiaochun upon becoming a celestial, it would never even have come. The Saint Emperor dynasty can claim credit for this damaged fan. Based on that, do you really think I'll let you have 6 spots? Impossible." The Vile Emperor chuckled coldly. Ignoring the Saint Emperor, he focused on the incoming fan, which was now little more than a streak of light. Anyone other than these two who were this close to the fan would likely have been killed. But they were Archeans, and were therefore qualified to observe it from this close distance. Closer and closer. After a few breaths of time passed, the huge fan slammed into the continent-sized hand of the gigantic sovereign, causing a massive rumbling sound to fill the eternal immortal domains. It was louder than heavenly thunder, and caused the 5 immortal domains to tremble. The eternal sea churned and heaved wildly. Bai Xiaochun hovered in midair as the deafening sound rolled out, looking up in the direction of the enormous sovereign's right hand. There, teetering back and forth, was an enormous, damaged fan. He could sense something otherworldly about the fan, and the aura which spread out from it into the eternal immortal domains reminded Bai Xiaochun very much of what it felt like to be in the presence of the Saint Emperor. That's not too far off. Gu Tianjun and the other celestials were also in the air, shaken as they stared up at the fan. An archean magical item. That aura is described in certain ancient records. It's the aura of the immortal from before the Great Destruction. It wasn't just Gu Tianjun and the other celestials who were shaken. The celestials in the Vile Emperor dynasty were equally stunned. Even Gongsun Wan'er, who was in a distant location at the moment, was taken aback. There were also many demigod experts within the eternal immortal domains who were now staring up at the enormous damaged fan, their eyes burning with passion. The enormous hand was not harmed by the fan slamming into it, and in fact, didn't even move at all in response. But as for the fan, it was severely damaged by the force of the impact. Cracks spread out on its already damaged surface, and then, chunks and rubble began to fall down off it, becoming like blazing meteorites that rained down onto the eternal immortal domains. There were millions of chunks of such rubble, all of which shot down with shocking speed and energy. In that very moment, both the Saint Emperor and the Vile Emperor took action. Their hands blurred with incantation gestures, causing 2 immense fields of light to shoot out. One field was blackish-violet, the other was made of 5 colors, and wherever they went, they transformed the falling rubble into ash. Afterward, both of the emperors sent divine scents out to touch the huge fan. Although the huge fan was severely damaged, both the face and the frame of the fan remained intact. As for the image depicted on the face of the fan, it was that of an entire world. It's a world treasure. Sadly, its energy is fading. Who knows how many things it struck on its journey through the stars. It's already crumbling and worthless. Both the Vile Emperor and the Saint Emperor shook their heads as they continued to scan the fan. In the end, they confirmed that the fan did not, in fact, have any of the aura of a sovereign on it. It only contained archean fluctuations, much the same as the 2 of them emanated. In fact, it was a bit weaker than that. Had the fan been a sovereign-level treasure, they would have been very excited, and would have gone to investigate it themselves. But it was not such a treasure, making it of little interest to the 2 emperors. However, even as they retracted their divine sense, something else happened. Among all of the countless bits of falling rubble that were being destroyed by the divine abilities they had just unleashed, there was a mountain-sized building. When the building was shattered, a lump of decaying black stone shot out from it. The black rock was vastly smaller than the building around it. But as the building fell apart, the rock completely ignored the beams of light sent out by the Saint Emperor and the Vile Emperor, and continued downward toward the eternal immortal domains. As it descended, it burst into intensely hot flames. The suddenness of the development caused the faces of the Vile Emperor and the Saint Emperor to fall. Both of them could tell that the rock didn't come from the fan, it came from the enormous sovereign who loomed over the eternal immortal domains. Damn it, eyes radiating anxiety, the Saint Emperor burst into motion, heading directly toward the black rock. The Vile Emperor also began to advance. However, at the same time, he performed an incantation gesture with his right hand, and then pushed it out toward the Saint Emperor. The Saint Emperor immediately vanished, reappearing some distance away with a look of rage on his face. What are you doing, Vile Emperor? What am I doing? Either one of us could use a chunk of that sovereign's flesh for augury purposes. It could contain secrets about how to break through to the sovereign realm. You think I'll just let you have it? Chuckling coldly, he began to rush toward the chunk of black stone. Killing intent sprang up in the eyes of the Saint Emperor as he too began to rush toward the rock again. Moments later, the 2 of them began to launch Taoist magics back and forth against each other as the black rock continued to speed downward. As it did, the rock suddenly split open and began to spew out a dark liquid, as well as something that sounded like a howling voice. Then, a boom rang out as the rock and the liquid slammed into the surface of the eternal sea. As a massive wave rolled out, the rock began to sink down to the bottom of the sea. The Vile Emperor and the Saint Emperor rushed down into the sea to follow it, causing more massive waves to roll out across the surface of the water. Even the immortal domains trembled as a result of what was happening. Thankfully, the process didn't last for very long. Moments later, both of the emperors emerged from the sea, grim looks on their faces as they exchanged murderous glances. You'd better compensate me for this, Saint Emperor. It got away. You should be the one compensating me. They stared at each other icily for a few breaths of time, then turned and left the Eternal Sea to return to their respective immortal domains to search for clues about where the Black Rock was. No one except for the two emperors knew exactly what it was they were searching for. After all, few people qualified to have been able to observe what happened with the black meteorite. Furthermore, the aura emanating from the teetering fan up above had completely attracted the attention of the celestials and demigods. Much talk spread through the immortal domains of the two dynasties during the following weeks. Back when the Saint Emperor dynasty was surrounded and about to be defeated by the vile Emperor dynasty, the Saint Emperor suddenly reached the Archean realm. It was all because he found a palace that had been floating in the void for countless years. No one knows exactly what he found inside of that palace, but after coming out from it, he was in the Archean realm. According to the ancient records I've read, every 10,000 years or so, a ruined object from beyond the heavens will fall into the eternal immortal domains. They're always objects of good fortune for us cultivators. Quite a few cultivators began to eye the damaged fan with deep hope. Demigods and celestials alike were all convinced that there was an Archean aura in the fan, which indicated that there was a high likelihood that it could provide assistance in reaching the Archean realm. Bai Xiaochun heard a lot of talk about the fan. Furthermore, now that he was a celestial, he had access to ancient records that most other cultivators could never peruse. According to the legends, that enormous sovereign destroyed all of the tens of thousands of realms that once existed in the starry sky. In that moment, the entire starry sky turned dark as countless worlds were exterminated. Nothing remained alive. The only things left behind were endless wilds and ruins, never-ending amounts of dust and bone. Occasionally, some of those ruins will float past the eternal immortal domains. It doesn't happen often, but when it does, they become good fortune for the cultivators of the eternal immortal domains. After studying the jade slip carefully, Bai Xiaochun was quite certain about the origin and nature of the fan. An Archean aura. A damaged world treasure. He looked up at the huge fan with excitement. From the way it was visibly teetering back and forth, anyone could see that before long, it would fall off the sovereign's hand and then continue on its way through the starry sky. For unknown reasons, neither the Saint Emperor nor the vile Emperor seemed inclined to try to keep the fan. Nor did they issue any orders for their subordinates to explore it and search for good fortune. And without their help, not even celestials could possibly reach the fan. The celestials from the two dynasties spent half a month waiting in eager anticipation, during which time neither the Saint Emperor nor the vile Emperor even made public appearances. A few more days went by, and finally, the Saint Emperor returned. When he did, he sent his divine sense out into Saint Emperor City and summoned the court officials for an audience. It was impossible to tell what he was thinking, but there was definitely something grim to his expression. As the officials gathered in the imperial palace, they could see that, and began to get nervous. Even Bai Xiaochun was acting especially cautious. Thankfully, he hadn't done anything to arouse public wrath recently, which made him a bit more confident. The Saint Emperor currently stood in front of the dragon throne, looking around at the gathered cultivators. He didn't bother with the warm expression he usually wore. It almost seemed like he had taken off a mask to reveal his true expression. His eyes were cold, and his cultivation base emitted powerful fluctuations that weighed down heavily on all of the cultivators in the imperial palace. Gu Tianjun and the other celestials exchanged glances, their hearts pounding with sensations of foreboding. The imperial palace was completely silent as the Saint Emperor looked at his subordinates, and mentally reviewed everything he had done in the past half-month. Unfortunately, no matter what he did, no clues had turned up. As far as the damaged fan went, although it contained good fortune, it was nothing that the Saint Emperor cared too much for. Furthermore, the Black Rock was a bad omen that he didn't want to have much to do with. However, it demanded an investigation. Only after performing that investigation had he returned and summoned his subordinates to make arrangements to send people to the fan. Gu Tianjun, Sima Yunhua. In response to his words, Gu Tianjun and the scholarly celestial both stepped forward and clasped hands respectfully. I would like to trouble the two of you to take a trip to the damaged fan up in the sky. If there is good fortune to be had, the two of you will have a chance to get it. As Gu Tianjun and Sima Yunhua both looked up, the Saint Emperor suddenly transmitted some words into their minds that only they could hear. Furthermore, you will check to see whether the damaged fan has anything to do with the gigantic sovereign. A chunk of the sovereign's flesh and blood fell in the form of a stone, which landed in the eternal sea and then vanished. In response to his words, serious expressions overtook the faces of Gu Tianjun and Sima Yunhua. Bai Xiaochun maintained full vigilance as this happened. Although he wasn't sure what the Saint Emperor had just said to Gu Tianjun and Sima Yunhua, he had the feeling that it had something to with the fan, which only seemed to grow more and more mysterious. As he pondered the situation, the Saint Emperor began to list the names of some of the demigods who would assist Gu Tianjun and Sima Yunhua in their venture. Eventually, his gaze came to fall on Bai Xiaochun, who was trying to remain hidden toward the back of the crowd. Thinking about all of the official requests he had received half a month ago, the Saint Emperor snorted coldly in his heart. Duke Heavenspan has become a celestial, so therefore, has earned the title of King Heavenspan. He will also participate in this mission. Bai Xiaochun's heart leapt into his throat. A few days ago, he would have been excited by this opportunity, but now, he had a very ill premonition. Saint Emperor, Your Majesty, I've been feeling a bit under the weather lately and, at this point, the Saint Emperor turned and began to walk off. The matter's settled, he said with decisiveness that could sever nails and chop iron. In 3 days, I'll personally send all of you off. Bai Xiaochun scowled miserably as the Saint Emperor walked off. By now, he could see that there was more to this damaged fan mission than met the eye. That was especially true considering that the Saint Emperor had essentially gone missing for half a month. Clearly, that had something to do with the fan. When you added in the grim look in the Saint Emperor's eyes, it caused Bai Xiaochun to feel very nervous. Of course, the surrounding court officials were all delighting in Bai Xiaochun's potential misfortune. By now, all of them were very clear about how well Bai Xiaochun could cause disasters. Whether it was the heavenly dragonfish, the lotus seed, or the lotus roots, all of them were convinced that if Bai Xiaochun stayed in Saint Emperor City, it would definitely cause chaos. As far as they were concerned, the Saint Emperor was being very wise, intelligent, and courageous to send Bai Xiaochun away. However, none of them allowed their true feelings to show on their faces. Some of them took the initiative to call out greetings to Bai Xiaochun, and even chat with him. Congratulations, King Heavenspan, you're a celestial now. Haha, how careless of me to have forgotten to congratulate you earlier. Please, I hope you take no offense. Oh, how the Saint Emperor dotes on you, King Heavenspan. And how jealous I am that you get to search for good fortune in that treasure from beyond the heavens. Best wishes, Heavenly King. I'm sure you'll meet with instant success, and achieve great benefits. After clasping hands and offering such words, the cultivators would leave, chuckling sarcastically in their hearts. Only Heavenly Marquis Lu seemed to think that the Saint Emperor had made a bad decision, based on everything he knew about Bai Xiaochun. However, he also felt as though there was more to the story than he understood, and in the end, just sighed and left. The truth was that the little turtle had come to be a source of much frustration. Although he had been in high spirits because of the incident with the lotus roots, considering he had no evidence to support his claims that Bai Xiaochun was at fault, he didn't dare to say anything publicly. After everyone left, Bai Xiaochun stood there miserably for a long moment, before finally shaking his head and heading back to his blessed land. There, he sat down and began to mull over the situation further. I'm a celestial, which makes me a lot stronger than before. But for some reason, the Saint Emperor is in a really bad mood. Furthermore, that damaged fan is definitely going to be very dangerous. The more he thought about it, the less at ease he felt about the Saint Emperor's orders. Furthermore, his final words had been spoken with extreme decisiveness, and also in very threatening fashion. Clearly, if Bai Xiaochun didn't follow orders, he would be gravely punished. Maybe instead of being so cautious, I should go all out from the beginning? After some more thought, he gritted his teeth and nodded. It wasn't that he suddenly didn't fear death. Rather, considering that he would be part of a large group of people, as long as he was careful and didn't get greedy, his celestial cultivation base should be enough to protect him. If he had been sent in alone, then he wouldn't have agreed to go inside the fan no matter what. Well, since I'm going, I need to make sure I'm fully prepared. His hair was already getting disheveled from all the worry. Not wanting to waste any time, he went out and began to spend all the resources he had built up during his time in Saint Emperor City to start making the proper preparations. Talismans, magical items, medicinal pills. He bought all sorts of things. Meanwhile, word was spreading both within Saint Emperor City, and in the rest of the dynasty at large, that the Saint Emperor was sending 3 celestials into the damaged fan. There were many people who weren't in the know that, upon finding out the names of the celestials who would be going to the damaged fan, reached out in the hopes of coming along. The Saint Emperor didn't stop that from happening. In fact, it wasn't just the celestials who this happened to. Even demigod experts such as Preceptor Seedeep began to get groups of followers, all of whom would theoretically have a chance to benefit from going on the mission. Word spread, and the fact that the mission was rumored to be very dangerous only made some people more interested than before. After all, many people in the cultivation world believed that rewards came only with risk. Therefore, a few days later, when the bells tolled in the Imperial Palace, Gu Tianjun, Sima Yunhua, as well as the 6 demigods, including Preceptor Seedeep, each arrived with teams to back them up, teams that had dozens of devas in them. Everyone was gathered, except for Bai Xiaochun. Bai Xiaochun had just hurried out of his blessed land. Looking back over his shoulder at the place where he had lived for over a year, he sighed. I'm not sure when I'll be back. Slapping his bag of holding, he produced several suits of leather armor. If he had had more multicolored flame, he would have performed more spirit enhancements. But right now, he couldn't afford to even perform 20-fold enhancements on all of them. As he walked along, he put on all of the armor, each piece of which was branded with a defensive magical symbol. Still not happy, he checked around quickly to make sure no one was watching, and then took out his turtle walk and hung it on his chest like a breastplate. Then he covered it with leather armor. From a distance, his normally thin frame now looked much the opposite. He almost looked like a big ball rolling along. In addition to all of that, he had a black helmet that glowed with the light of a defensive spell formation, as well as a second, larger walk that he strapped on his back. Anyone from the river-defying sect would find this sight very familiar. But these were the Eternal Lands, and thus, everyone who saw him was stunned. The guards outside the Imperial Palace hardly recognized him. And when he arrived in the palace square, Gu Tianjun, Sima Yunhua, Preceptor Seedeep, and all of the others who were already there waiting were all visibly stunned. Only when he trundled to a stop next to them did people finally get around to reacting. Why is he wearing so much stuff? Heavens! This Bai Xiaochun has enough defensive magical items to protect a 100-man army. Look at that helmet. It's so hot today, isn't he uncomfortable? Forget the helmet. Look at that walk. Unbelievable. Where did he even get it? If Gu Tianjun and the powerful experts like him were stunned, then there was little need to mention the diva cultivators. At the same time, many of them suddenly started wondering exactly how dangerous this mission was going to be. Was it really so terrifying that a mighty celestial would go to the extent of preparing in this fashion? When Bai Xiaochun saw the reactions of the crowd, he cleared his throat proudly. After all, if he hadn't dressed up like this so many times in the Heavenspan realm, he would probably have long since lost his poor little life. Maybe I am a celestial now, but that doesn't mean I can just forget about danger. Caution can keep you alive for thousands of years. Sighing, he prepared to say something when, all of a sudden, a cold snort rang out that caused all hearts present to tremble, including Gu Tianjun and Sima Yunhua. Everyone reflexively clasped hands and bowed respectfully. The Saint Emperor strode out into the open and glanced around. When he saw Bai Xiaochun and his get-up, even he was taken aback. Trying to pretend he hadn't noticed, he took a deep breath and waved his right hand through the air. Instantly, the power of an Archean cultivation base erupted out into heaven and earth. The sky went dim, and a holy light erupted, not from the sky, but up toward it. It moved with incredible speed, as though it intended to split apart heaven and earth. At the same time, intense fluctuations rolled out in all directions. In the blink of an eye, the light turned onto a passageway connecting them to the damaged fan up above. Well, get going, men, the Saint Emperor said. Gu Tianjun and Sima Yunhua took deep breaths and then headed into the tunnel. The others present flew up after them. As for Bai Xiaochun, he took a deep breath before joining them, being the last to head into motion. As the damaged fan got closer and closer, Bai Xiaochun looked down to see Saint Emperor City growing smaller and smaller. Before long, it was too small to see clearly. At the same time, the enormous sovereign grew larger and larger, emanating pressure that even celestials couldn't resist. Because of that pressure, it was obvious that no one present could ever leave the eternal immortal domains, even if they wanted to. Only Archean experts could theoretically resist it, and perhaps use their cultivation base power to get people past it. Intense rumbling sounds could be heard, and Bai Xiaochun felt his body vibrating. Then, he suddenly felt lighter, as though he had broken free from some force that had been tugging on him. At that point, he looked around and saw a black void. Thus, this episode comes to an end. Remember to like and comment so we can discuss the story together. Until we meet again in the next chapters.